Now recognize Mr. Cloud from Texas for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I think most people, back home tuning into this would first of all be shocked to find out that maybe some of the suspicions, like weather modification is one of those things that's like not really been talked about, and people are like, is it happening? Is it not? I don't know. I see things online, and then come to find out like, okay, this has really been happening for decades. This is not conspiracy theory. This is like fact. There's businesses involved in doing this, and that brings up all these questions about how is this happening? How is that permitted? Is any business just able to go out and, hey, I want to modify the weather in my area because I want rain? Well, what about these people who don't want rain? And where are those lines and how does that work? And then there comes the liability side of this. Recently I'm from Texas, and so, I was there at Kerrville when the tragedy happened, and everybody's concerned. Some cloud seeding happened a couple of days prior. I'm not a meteorologist, you are, and Mr. Martz, and I guess there's an understanding that that was too far away, I guess. But it does bring up the question about liability, and if it was, would the business be liable then or not, and all these questions. I was wondering, Mr. Pelkey, if you could touch on kind of those thoughts and what the current framework is, and just kind of give us a 101 for the citizenry, in a sense.
Yeah, let me say, I've been aware of weather modification all my life. My dad was a meteorologist.
Yeah, but you're involved in this, right?
And so when I was preparing for this hearing, I looked at the NOAA database, and I was, shocked to find there was more than 1,100 reports in that database covering the last 10 years or so. So weather modification is ongoing, and the reporting is not particularly good. Assessing the effectiveness is not good, and that leads people to ask questions. So if we go back to Project Cirrus back 1947, I think it was Hurricane King, it started dissipating, and then it took a left turn and then struck the U.S. It's a natural question when someone intervenes in a system to say, did your intervention cause this bad thing to happen? This is why I've recommended having a very public, very authoritative study. We can't have Republican science and Democrat science. We have to have science that's trusted by everyone to assess what weather modification has been done, what have been the effects. If we don't know what the effects are, what research can we do to know those effects? And if we can't know the effects, maybe that would structure how we think about going forward with that technology.
Mr. Martz, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I largely agree with that. I was actually going to bring up Project Cirrus, which obviously was a concern. There's also the concern, in the case of like geoengineering. I know it kind of going off topic from weather modification, but it's a similar kind of issue here. If you were to, again, if they were to implement this and it were to be successful, it were to cause, a few tenths up to maybe a degree Celsius of global cooling, over the course of 3 to 5 years. And of course, you'd have to continue to do that over several years because the aerosols mix out. Mm-hmm. But there's also the concern that say we did this, and the instantaneous cooling occurred, and there was a really cold winter, that sent, temperatures plunging below zero down into Louisiana. We saw this actually this past winter with the Gulf Coast winter storm and the Arctic outbreak. Say something like that happened. Well, people will then probably, blame that on the geoengineering. In fact, we know kind of through what natural variability, obviously the effects of this with volcanic eruptions. In 1815, Mount Tambora erupted and caused the year without a summer in 1816 when there was 2 feet of snow in Vermont in June. And during that same period, there were frosts in Georgia, the chairwoman's district. So there's definitely concerns about that, and there would be lawsuits filed. After Project Cirrus, there were lawsuits filed, and obviously the results were eventually inconclusive. And the U.S. Weather Bureau put together a team of scientists that showed that the hurricanes can make those kinds of turns all on their own, and that kind of allowed the lawsuits to kind of subside. But there are definitely real concerns about that happening in the future. Again, we just saw this with the Texas floods, with I think it was Rainmaker Corporation, if I'm correct. And obviously, when they seeded, that was the days before, and it was, I think, 150 miles southeast of Houston. So it had no effect, but the people still ask the questions, and it also raises the concern of lawsuits being brought against these companies.
Well, and then I had the question, and Dr. McCracken, you talked about this too. You said there's no scientific evidence that it works or that it doesn't. You mentioned that too, Mr. Pelkey. We've had people, not on our subcommittee that I'm aware of, but on our general oversight committee say, the Earth's going to end I think the countdown's down to 6 years now, and there's this hysteria built around what we can and cannot do, yet there's no data for it. And I just say, like, our economy, we've spent trillions of dollars on this, and like, are we actually moving that data out? Or, I mean, what's the question on that? Anyway,
Yeah.